A woman stepped off the stagecoach with a secret written in her last letter. 5 words that could end everything before it even began. I ain't pretty, sir. Thomas Reed's hands wouldn't stop shaking as he read those words again. His fingers, rough from years of ranch work, traced the careful handwriting. She had written it slowly, he could tell. Maybe she erased it once or twice, trying to make the truth sound softer. The paper smelled clean, like soap. Maybe a hint of cinnamon. Maybe hope mixed with fear. Outside his window, the Wyoming plains stretched endlessly under the morning light. Frost covered the grass like tiny diamonds. Cattle were calling in the distance. The windmill made its familiar creaking sound. Life kept moving whether Thomas was ready or not. He wasn't sure he was ready. 8 long years had passed. 8 years since his house fell silent. 8 years since his wife Eleanor died bringing their baby into the world. A son they never got to name. 8 years of learning that a man could own hundreds of acres and still feel like he was drowning. Thomas folded the letter, then opened it again. I wanted to tell you before I arrived, she had written, so you wouldn't feel disappointed when you saw me. That word hit him hard. Disappointed. He hadn't realized how much that word haunted him until now. In less than 2 hours, a stagecoach would arrive in Dry Creek. It would bring a woman he had never seen. A woman who could become his wife by Sunday if he didn't turn her away. Thomas stood up from the table. His boots sounded heavy on the wooden floor. The house was clean but empty. After Eleanor died, comfort seemed wrong. Almost dangerous. He pressed his forehead against the cold window glass. What kind of woman apologizes for existing before she even arrives? Thomas Reed was 43 years old but felt much older. The ranch was doing well. More than well. Cattle prices were strong. The land was good. His foreman Will had been with him since before everything fell apart. Will ran the place almost as well as Thomas himself. But success doesn't sit across from you at dinner. It doesn't ask about your day. It doesn't laugh when you drop a spoon into the soup. Thomas hadn't heard laughter in his house for nearly 10 years. His sister Clara had finally broken through his stubbornness last winter. You're not living, she told him straight. You're just existing loudly. Thomas frowned over his coffee. That's dramatic. It's true. Clara watched him with that knowing look only sisters have. You still sleep on one side of the bed. That shut him up. Clara was the one who pushed him to place the advertisement. Widowed rancher seeking honest woman for marriage. Wyoming territory. Hard work. Simple life. Thomas hated every word of it. But letters came anyway. Some women wanted money. Some wanted fancy dresses. Some wanted promises Thomas didn't know how to make. Then her letter arrived. Sarah Whitlow. She didn't ask about land or cattle. She asked if the stars were brighter in Wyoming. She wrote about a kitchen where she once worked. How feeding people felt like stitching the world back together, one meal at a time. She confessed she talked to plants while working because it helped them grow better. Thomas had laughed out loud at that. He hadn't laughed like that in years. Their letters became the best part of his week. Then her last letter came. I ain't pretty, sir. Suddenly everything felt fragile again. Dry Creek was already buzzing when Thomas hitched the wagon. Word traveled fast in a small town. Everyone knew the stagecoach was bringing a mail-order bride. Clara sat beside him, arms crossed, eyes sharp. You look like you're going to your own funeral, she said. Feels like it. She smirked. Relax. Worst case, you scare her off and go back to being miserable alone. That's not helpful. Clara leaned closer. Thomas, anyone who writes a letter like that has been hurt before. Don't you dare be the man who proves her right. The stagecoach arrived in a cloud of dust. Passengers climbed down one by one. Then she appeared. Sarah Whitlow. She was plain, just like she warned him. Brown hair pulled back neatly. A simple dress. Nothing fancy. No attempt to impress. But when she looked up and their eyes met, something shifted inside Thomas. Her eyes weren't shy. They were careful. Measuring. Like someone who learned the hard way not to expect kindness but hadn't completely given up on it yet. She stepped forward, holding a small bag in one hand and a covered basket in the other. "You're Mr. Reed," she said. "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once, bracing herself. "Thank you for coming." There it was again. Gratitude for something that should be expected. Thomas cleared his throat. "I'm glad you're here." Her shoulders relaxed just a little. That small change did something dangerous to him. Hope stirred. The ride to the ranch was polite and quiet. Sarah sat beside Clara, hands folded in her lap. She answered questions politely but didn't offer more than necessary. Thomas recognized that behavior. He lived it himself. The habit of making yourself small so you wouldn't be noticed and wouldn't be rejected. When they arrived, Sarah looked at the house slowly. "It's solid," she said. "Feels like it stands its ground." "That's one way to describe it," Thomas replied. She smiled faintly. Good houses usually do. That night, she cooked. The house changed. The smell alone felt like a memory Thomas didn't know he had. Warm bread. Herbs. Something rich and comforting. Clara took one bite and closed her eyes. "Oh. Oh my." Sarah laughed quietly. "That good?" "If you ever poison him," Clara said, "I'll forgive you. Because this is worth dying for." Sarah laughed again, this time fully and freely. Thomas watched her face light up when someone appreciated her work. And it hit him hard. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was trying to earn permission to stay. That night, long after the lamps went out, Thomas lay awake listening. Soft footsteps down the hall. The faint sound of dishes being set aside for morning. For the first time in 8 years, the house didn't feel hollow. It felt occupied. And that scared him more than the loneliness ever had. The first thing Thomas noticed the next morning was sound. Not silence. Not the heavy quiet that had ruled his house like an unwanted guest for 8 years. But movement. A soft clink of dishes. Water rushing from the pump. A low humming, almost a tune, coming from the kitchen. Thomas lay still, listening. The house felt alive again. He checked the clock. Just past 5 in the morning. Too early for polite company. Too early for expectations. Yet somehow Sarah was already awake. Already moving. Already doing. He exhaled slowly. Of course she was. By the time Thomas walked into the kitchen, the smell of coffee hit him first. Strong and rich. Not the thin, bitter stuff he'd grown used to making himself. Sarah stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up past her elbows, hair pinned back loosely. A few strands had escaped and curled near her face. She turned when she heard him. "Oh, good morning," she said quickly, like she'd been caught doing something she wasn't allowed to do. "Morning," Thomas replied. Then after a pause, "You didn't have to get up so early." She hesitated, spoon hovering over the pot. "I wanted to. Not, I enjoy it. Not, I like mornings. I wanted to be useful." Clara was already at the table, halfway through a biscuit, watching them like it was theater. "This coffee," Clara announced, "is the kind that makes a person believe in second chances." Sarah blinked. "That's good." Thomas poured himself a cup and took a sip. It was good. Dangerously good. "So," Clara said casually. How'd you sleep, Sarah? Sarah glanced at Thomas before answering. Fine. The bed's comfortable. It squeaks, Thomas said before thinking. Sarah smiled faintly. Only when you move. Clara choked on her biscuit. Thomas felt heat crawl up his neck. What I meant was. I know what you meant, Sarah said quickly, clearly embarrassed. I just noticed. Clara grinned. Well, I for one am thrilled the house is making noise again. Days passed. Sarah learned the house. She rearranged nothing without asking, but somehow everything ended up where it made sense. The kitchen grew warmer, not just in temperature but in feeling. A small vase appeared on the windowsill with wildflowers Thomas didn't remember bringing in. You can take them down if you like, she said one afternoon, catching him looking. No, he replied too quickly. I like them. She nodded, filing that away like it mattered. Because to her, it did. Thomas learned Sarah in pieces. She talked to herself when she worked but went quiet if someone listened. She hummed while kneading dough. She saved bacon grease in a jar because waste is a kind of sadness. That one made him smile. Sometimes in the evenings, they sat on opposite ends of the table after supper. Sipping tea. Not talking. Not avoiding each other either. Just existing in the same space. It felt intimate in a way that made Thomas uncomfortable. Yet he found himself craving it. One evening, as the sun turned the plains gold, Sarah lingered near the bookshelf. You read a lot, she said. I used to, Thomas replied. Before things got busy. She nodded, understanding more than he said. She reached for a worn book, fingers brushing the spine. This one, you mentioned it in a letter. You said it helped you sleep after Eleanor died. Thomas froze. I did. Yes. He swallowed. I forgot I told you that. She looked at him. Really looked at him. I didn't. The silence stretched. I still have your letters, she said softly. So do I. Her breath caught. You do. I kept them in my desk, he admitted. Read them when the house got too quiet. Sarah laughed under her breath, half disbelieving. You reread mine? Yes. Why? He didn't answer right away. Because, he said finally, they reminded me I wasn't the only one who felt lonely. Something shifted between them. Not romance. Not yet. But recognition. The first time Sarah laughed freely around him, it was over something stupid. Thomas had been repairing a door hinge when it slipped from his hand and clattered loudly to the floor. Damn it, he muttered. Sarah poked her head around the corner. Are you injured or just offended? He blinked. Mostly offended. She smiled. The door or your pride? Both. She laughed. A real laugh. Warm and unguarded. Thomas stared like he'd just witnessed lightning strike indoors. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. Nothing, he said quickly. Just, hadn't heard that sound in a while. Her smile softened. I like making people laugh. I noticed. Then before she could stop herself, she added, it's easier than making them stay. The words hung between them. Thomas set the hinge down carefully. Sarah, he said, slow and deliberate. You don't have to earn staying here. She didn't look at him. Everyone says that at first. Thomas didn't know how to argue with that. Dry Creek noticed her. Of course they did. They noticed the smell of bread drifting into the street. They noticed ranch hands lingering near the house longer than necessary. They noticed Thomas Reed, silent widower, walking differently. Lighter somehow. At church that Sunday, the pews whispered. Sarah sat beside Thomas, hands folded neatly, eyes forward. Women glanced at her dress, her hair, her posture. Plain. Capable. Useful. One woman leaned close enough to another to be overheard. Well, at least she'll keep him fed. Sarah stiffened. Thomas heard it. He felt it sharp and sour. But he said nothing. The service continued. Afterward at the social, Sarah laid out food she prepared that morning. People ate. They praised. They took seconds. Compliments flowed about the cooking. Never about her. Thomas watched Sarah smile politely, nod, deflect. Like praise was something she wasn't allowed to fully accept. On the ride home, she was quiet. Too quiet. That night, she washed dishes long after they were clean. Thomas stood in the doorway, watching her scrub the same plate again and again. "Sarah," he said gently. "It's already clean." She paused. "I know." Then she kept scrubbing. He turned away, heart heavy. Silence again. His old enemy. 3 days later, Clara cornered him near the barn. "She's pulling away," she said bluntly. "She's tired," Thomas replied. "She's hurt." He sighed. "I don't know what to say." Clara crossed her arms. "That didn't work out so well last time either." That stung. "She heard those women," Clara continued. "She heard you not say anything. I didn't want to embarrass her." She was already embarrassed. Thomas rubbed his face. "I'm trying not to ruin this." "You're succeeding beautifully," Clara said dryly. That night, Thomas sat alone at the table long after Sarah went to bed. He stared at the empty chair across from him and wondered how many times in his life he'd let silence do the damage for him. The carriage came 2 days later. Black. Polished. Out of place. Sarah was in the garden when it stopped. She froze. The woman who stepped down wore silk and certainty. "Sarah Whitlow," the woman said brightly. "Well, this is unexpected." Sarah went pale. Thomas approached, instinct screaming. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman smiled thinly. "I was wondering if she told you." "Told me what?" She tilted her head. "About St. Louis." "Please don't," Sarah whispered. The woman laughed softly. "Oh, darling, he deserves to know." Thomas felt the ground shift beneath him. For the first time, he understood. This wasn't just about cooking. This was about shame. And it had finally found them. The story continues with Thomas standing between Sarah and her past, their quiet love being tested, and both learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is speak when silence feels safer.